Charles Dixon, a.k.a. Sensei Vegan. And we have our special guest, Rachel Gitlevich. How you doing, folks?
Good.
How you guys doing?
Very well.
Awesome.
This is the Animation Bowl. Forget the Super Bowl, man. This is Animation Bowl Sunday.
Yes, we're going to talk about some animation today. Of course, we talk about everything sci-fi, fantasy, and geek media, but yes, a special show about animation. And Rachel, you know a little bit about animation because you're an animator and you work for a company called Titmouse. Tell us about how did you get into animation and what's this whole Titmouse thing?
Like most of you tuning in, I grew up loving cartoons and animation and stuff like that. I'm actually Russian, so I got a mix of Russian animation as well as American. And Russians definitely view animation as more of like a fine art than just like as a cartoon or a piece of entertainment. So I've always taken animation seriously my whole life and decided to pursue it professionally. So I attended art college. I went to University of the Arts in Philadelphia, where I double majored in animation and film. Almost went into illustration, but I stuck to my guns. Was like, no, I'm going to be an animator. When you're a student, you kind of don't know what you're signing up for. But here I am. After graduating, it took about 2 years for me to break into the industry. But I heard that there was this company looking for more animators for a show called Super Jail, which I absolutely adored in high school. Not in high school, I'm sorry, in college. I remember watching it while working on my own senior thesis, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could work. There's no way I'm going to get it, but I'm going to apply. I'm going to try. So they sent out an animation test where I had to do like a short shot of like the warden and Alice and Jared. I think I cried, and I was just like, ugly cry sobbing the entire time I was doing this test because it was just so nerve-wracking. But I did it. I sent it in. I think they mistook my name for somebody else's because they hired me. I don't know how, but I think they saw something in me at the time. So 6 years later, I'm still there working as an animator and assistant character designer. And it's just been a completely wild ride.
Nice.
And awesome. You've got a lot of properties under your belt that people know, which is really awesome. I mean, just go through the list of some of them.
Yeah.
Let's see. Picture Titmouse. I'm actually going to just pull things up. If you could list some of the stuff that you've worked on that you're able to mention.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I can mention. Yeah. Well, let's start. I mean, I've already mentioned it, but let's start with Super Jail.
Okay.
So Super Jail seasons 3 and 4. Then what are some other things that I've worked on that you guys would have known? So Turbo.
Oh, wait. Before you even go, Super Jail is like, you said it's like Willy Wonka?
Yeah, so Super Jail is basically, like, imagine if Willy Wonka ran a prison. It's one of those shows where, like, you play it, 11 minutes later, you blink and go, what just happened? I love it. I think it's amazing. It is one of my favorite shows of all time, and also one of the favorite things that I've ever worked on. I came off a job, like, animating, like, literally animating puppies. Like, that's what I was doing before. And then, like, my first week on the job, I had to animate an adult scene. So just that juxtaposition. I was like, well, this is my day job now.
That's it, man. Boom. They threw you right in the mix.
Yeah, going from like PBS to or PBS like property straight to Adult Swim was definitely a jump.
That's fine.
So then I also worked on Turbo for the Netflix DreamWorks. Worked on Hot Wheels, which is also on Netflix. Both movies, I think they're called. I'm not sure if they're episodes or movies. They're just very, very long episodes. I worked on Ninja Turtles: Blast to the Past
Nice.
for Nickelodeon. That was a great project. I worked on Home, which is also based off of the DreamWorks movie, also can be seen on Netflix. I worked on China, Illinois for Adult Swim. I worked briefly on that one. I also worked on Nico, Sword of Light, on Amazon.
Now, hold on a second. With
and
Nico, when you look
Yeah.
at that, the style, like for instance, because you said you also worked on Turbo, right?
hmm
Look at the style of Turbo. I mean, it's very, very kiddie. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? And then,
Yeah, they're round, they're squishy.
yeah, and then when you look at Nico, it just bumps into this whole anime kind of vibe. It's like this weird in between American animation and an anime.
I like
Yes.
that.
How do you choose the look?
I don't get to choose the look. We have a very, very talented team of designers at Titmouse who help develop the characters, the style of the characters. A lot of times, a show will have a showrunner, and the showrunner basically dictates the style. So, like Super Jail is done the way Christy Caracas draws. That's the way Super Jail looks, and that's the style that the animators have to emulate. Same thing for Turbo. So Turbo already existed as a feature film. The designs were already done. It was just our job to find a way to make them two-dimensional. So Nico's Sword of Light is actually based on an interactive graphic novel. The name of the artist escapes me right now, and I feel incredibly guilty for it. But maybe you can pull it up and post just like his name. So the style was already established because of the creator's own style. And part of an animator's job is to be able to draw in the style required of the show. In the biz, we call it drawing on model, because the character model, that's what we refer to the character. And so drawing on model because you have a team of animators and they all have their own style. So you have to make it seem like it was all drawn by one person. And even so, like, a studio will have kind of a signature look. Like, even though, like, Nico and Turbo and Super Jail are all completely different shows, if you line those shows up compared to, like, something that Cartoon Network produces or something that's produced in France or something produced from Japan, you can still see that a studio retains their own style, which I think is kind of cool.
Now, what about
so, like, we as a
Hanazuki? Is that Hanazuki? Would that be? How would you describe that look?
Hanazuki, that look, I would describe it as, to coin the Japanese phrase, chibi. We have like really big heads, really big eyes, everything's really cutesy. You also have to think about who the target audiences are for our films. So Hanazuki is definitely aimed at younger girls, whereas something like Hot Wheels is aimed at, like 8, 7, 6-year-old boys. Whereas Super Jail is aimed for college students and adults.
Now,
I found this fascinating. What are you about to say, Sensei Vegan?
Yeah, as far as we had said this really quick before we started taping, as far as timing, how long does it take you to do a feature from start to finish? I mean, a complete production.
Oh, a feature film?
Or even just like, let's just say a slot for a cartoon, like something that we would see. How long does it take you to do start to finish, from everything to writing, editing, drawing, everything, art, everything?
Yeah, so a typical cartoon would last about 11 minutes to fill the 15-minute slot of time, the other 4 minutes being filled by commercials. Thanks, TV. So those 11 minutes from like early onset writing through storyboarding, through animation, cleanup, compositing, effects, editing, sound, final export, I want to say anywhere between 3 to 4 months for just that one episode. So we could be working for like a year and a half just to get one season of a show out the door from all the way that start to finish. Animation for an 11-minute episode, we are working in big teams, so it takes us anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks for animation, and then another 1 or 2 weeks for cleanup.
Gotcha. Wow, it's amazing. Wow, you heard it, folks.
Yeah,
I love animation though, but it is very time consuming.
It is very time consuming. Yeah. For every second, and I'm talking seconds, not minutes, for every second of anything happening on screen, those are 24 individual drawings.
Wow. Wow.
So that's the frame rate, 24 frames a second. So if you have something that's 11 minutes long, that is a lot of seconds. I don't remember the math off the top of my head, but the number is very big.
And you guys are still using, like, I know you guys use computers and everything like that, but that's just a lot of hand drawn.
Yes, we hand draw on these things called Cintiqs, where it's just like a regular monitor, except it has a glass over it, and we have this thing. Ooh, I have it on me right now. A little Cintiq pen. It looks like a fancy pen.
We have one of those.
Yeah, and then we just draw right on the screen with the pen.
Nice.
So it's still the same process of drawing by hand with paper, except instead of a paper, we have like a giant plastic and glass electronic brick.
Nice.
Wow. So I get it with the different styles of animation, and that perfectly makes sense. You know, it's even different visions of who you're going after. You're going after kids or adults. But how does that affect the animating part? When you make it come to life, are you approaching it different based on the drawing style, or the movement you approach that the same way?
That's a very, very good question. A show like Nico is an action show. We have a lot of fighting, lots of running, lots of jumping. It's a very active, dynamic show. And also you can tell that the characters do have a lot of details on them. Nico's mohawk, for example, is a very like geometric, complicated shape that we have to figure out how it looks like from different angles and track all of that. We have this, I feel like the Japanese really perfected this. So we have like the money shots, like the really, really intense, super cool animation shots where we go full out. We draw every single frame. Like we take like a shot like that can take like up to 2 weeks to animate just one shot. Wow. But it's beautiful and it's dynamic. And then all the surrounding shots, we keep it really, really simple. So it's just characters talking. They don't really have to move that much. So what time we save with the easier shots, we make up in for, I think in Japanese it's called sakuga or sakuga shots, where it's just like absolutely insane camera moves, stuff is flying at the screen, like the really, really hard, complicated stuff. So it depends show to show. Like Turbo is like a really good mix of like action and just like them talking at each other, but being like kind of like, you know, blobby, you want like their eyes to move a little bit, you know, offset from the rest of their bodies. Turbo was great because they didn't have arms or legs, so you're just animating a circle with like a face on it, which was a lot easier and a lot faster to work with. However, their shells are very, very, very difficult. So we had to kind of figure out a process within the studio. It's like, okay, how do we deal with the shells? Unfortunately, I can't talk about it because of non-disclosure agreements. But, you know, we kind of came up with our own way of like, okay, how do we make these shells go faster? And we did come up with a pretty cool solution, and they look amazing in the show. I think Turbo is a really, really underrated show. And I'm not saying this because I worked on it, but I was not as crazy about the movie when it came out. Like, it was a good movie, but it wasn't anything special. Mm-hmm. But the show makes me laugh. Like, I'm watching the animatic, which is the storyboards timed out to the dialogue and the music already. So I watched like the animatic before we start animating it, because you want to understand where your shot falls in the grand scheme of things, so you know like what it's, you know, what comes before it, what comes after it, and like the feel of the shot. So I'm sitting there watching the animatic, and I just watched the entire thing through because it was just so funny. I was just giggling to myself at my desk. at some of the jokes. So go watch Turbo. It's great.
All right, I'm gonna do that actually. I didn't know that.
So, okay, so what about Nerdland, where you're going after adults in
Yes.
this one?
So Nerdland is a very interesting special case. When you think about animated features in the United States, you think about Pixar, right? You think about Disney. And then like lately the Oscars have kind of been like showing us, right? So we've got like stuff from Ireland, like Secret of Kells, Song of the Sea, Breadwinners, right? We do get stuff from Japan, like Studio Ghibli, the work of Satoshi Kon. Earlier, then we have the work of, director Masaki Yusasa. You know, his stuff is, you know, coming in. So we sort of get, I completely botched the pronunciation of that. I'm so sorry. But, you know, so the feature film, like, scene in America is very, like, it's, like, very geared towards kids, very geared towards CG animation. So it makes, anytime we get, like an independent feature that isn't for kids, it's really, really special. So especially if it's 2D animated, that's like practically unheard of the States. Unfortunately, the way the business is stacked, you know, a lot of producers don't want to take that risk because a lot of adults, they kind of still view as animation as something for kids. They're not going to go out of their way to like see it. So producers pick up on that attitude, so they don't want to risk putting in all of this money to make a film. But, you know, Titmouse got this amazing opportunity to do a feature film. But the problem is when you try and create one, you deal with very, very low budget. So we had to work really, really smart with how we animated it and the style and how we told those jokes. I think that Titmouse was very, very clever, very economic about it. And I think that we came out with a pretty great looking film. This film was, once again, I'm always forgetting names right before I need to say them, and I sincerely apologize to all of our viewers, but thankfully we have Google, so we can Google this together after the show. But it was created by this writer who wrote a script, and he like insisted that it was animated, and he knew Chris P, the owner of Titmouse, and he was like, hey, can we make this movie? Like, and he basically paid for most of it himself, which is like unheard of, you know, for a man to be that independently wealthy to like commission an entire feature film. But that's kind of the story of how Nerdland came about. Quick synopsis: Nerdland is the story of these two guys who are trying so hard to like get famous. Like they moved to LA, like then their girlfriends, they want to get famous. So they decide that the way to get famous is to become murderers. I won't say anything more, but as the title suggests, they are nerds. So the way that they go about doing this is, it makes for an interesting story.
Wow. And the thing that, even when we got into doing comic books and everything, I would always try to convey that comic books, cartoons, animation, it's for everybody. And when I go back and I look at the old, like, Bugs Bunny, like, Looney Tunes stuff, that stuff wasn't for kids. I mean, if you go back and you watch some of that stuff, it wasn't. Because, like, even as a kid watching it, I liked it. I didn't get all the jokes. But I can go back and watch it now, and I'll be just laughing. This stuff was adult-oriented.
And that's what, you know, that is the mark of, like, a good storyteller. When your story has that many layers that you can keep coming back to it over and over again and find something new in it, you know. I am totally going to compare Looney Tunes to Shakespeare, because Shakespeare did the same thing, right? Like, he had all of those throwaway jokes for the people who he knew weren't going to follow along the plot, right? But then he had a lot more sophisticated humor written in, you know, for people to, like, reabsorb it later and things like that. So, yeah, even, like, going back to, like, Rocko's Modern Life, I'll watch a few of those episodes. I don't think they even air some of them anymore. Like, there's one where Mrs. Bighead was feeling, like, she was feeling like her husband wasn't paying attention to her, so she kept like inviting Rocco over to like do like all sorts of like little tasks. And there was totally like a Mrs. Robinson, are you trying to seduce me moment. And this is like for kids, right? There's this, I will never forget it. This moment where Rocco is literally in bed with Mrs. Big Head, and she's asking him to feel her eyeballs because she's got some big eyes. So he's just like, yes, Mrs. Big Head, they're very nice. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah, man. It's amazing how they just take, again, it's like an onion, all the different layers, just a bunch of different layers, man. And there's something in there for everybody. Amazing.
Now, speaking of
there's
adult
just
content, what about Big Mouth? Big Mouth, I saw that it's on Netflix, and that was so amazing. The concept, it was just great.
I'm amazed. I'm so upset that I didn't get to work on that project. I'm a huge advocate for sex ed. I actually work with a nonprofit organization called amaze.org. This is, I guess, right here. We would type in the text for it, where my hands are, which is an online resource for kids to like learn about sex ed. So they commission animators to create animated shorts that, you know, they go into gender identity, sexual safety, puberty education, STD, like everything. It's an amazing organization, and I created a few films for them. So when I first saw Big Mouth, when I saw the trailer, I was initially worried because I'm like, please don't mess this up, please don't be inaccurate, please don't like perpetuate unfortunate gender and racial stereotypes, as the topic seems to do in a lot of media. And they did such an amazing job with it. They were so brutally honest. And, you know, the animation, of course, is great. I mean, not to toot our own horn, but, you know, titmouse.
Toot your horn.
But, yeah, I think I'm waiting for season 2. I want to know what happens. I want to know what happens to the pillowcase.
And you know what? If you didn't see it, you have no idea what we're talking about with the pillowcase. But once you do see it, you'll be pleasantly surprised and be like, yeah, I want to know what's happening with that pillowcase.
Depending on how you felt about that episode.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, there were some moments I was like, did they really just do that? Did they really go there? And they did. And they kept doing it, and they kept going there.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not politically correct, that's for sure. That's, if you're looking for a show to do that, that is not the show for you.
No, they do not care about taboos on Big Mouth. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So,
well, hey, man, if Sausage Party can get away with what they did, I think Big Mouth can go ahead and, you know, yeah.
Well, you know what the thing is? Big Mouth is, I guess that's a good way to put it, Rachel, so brutally honest. And it brings you back to your childhood. It's weird because it brings you back to your childhood, but also as an adult, it makes you think of how you're going to approach conversations and viewpoints that you wouldn't. So it hits you on two levels at the same time. And I think that's the brilliance of the show.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And once again, like, you couldn't do this show live action. There is no way you could do this as a live action show. So once again, animation comes to the rescue. It can be for adults, people. It can.
It's true.
Rachel, you're going to be at Fanfare.
That's right, I will.
And we will be there also live. Tell us, why Fanfare? Why are you supporting Fanfare?
I mean, I'm a teacher, you know, I'm always happy to explain the process of animation and talk to people who are interested in it. Like, it's my life. I like love it. Like, that's why I'm here in this interview. Like, I can talk animation in my sleep. I love it. So, if there's anything that I can impart on other people, that they can benefit from, and like, why not? I know this is Fanfare's first event, and I really like how like Comic-Con, like comic conventions, they've definitely, they don't talk about the process very often. They focus so much on like the celebrity voice actors and like the mainstream live action stuff.
Thank you.
For comics, Comic-Con, the art. So the fact that Fanfare is trying to like get back to the root of is, the people who are in the trenches, not in the recordings for 3 hours and then they're done. Not saying that being a voice actor is easy, but that's just like such a small slice of the whole production process. So I mean, I can't not support, somebody who's trying to like shed the light on the process. If at the end of the day the only thing I've done is make people appreciate my art form even a little bit more, then I've done my job. Fanfare's done its job, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm about to cry over here. I agree. I do. I think a lot of times the light is shed on the main fact, but behind the curtain, there's so much more going on, and a lot of people behind the curtain, they don't get the credit that I think they should. And that is awesome. It's true, because it is a lot of work that goes on. It's not just the voice actors; it's everything that goes on to bring that stuff to the forefront. There's so much. Yeah.
I think what really I think the moment where I absolutely decided that I want to go into animation was with the Lord of the Rings DVD bonus behind the scenes, because that was the first time this was before Netflix streaming. This was before you could really get a lot of this kind of content on YouTube. I was still in high school when those DVDs and stuff were coming out, or at the very beginning of college, where YouTube was a complete it was different. It wasn't owned by Google. It was a completely different world out there in terms of media. And really the only way that I could really check out professionals talking about their craft would be DVD extras. But they were always really short. It was usually the actors talking about it. And Lord of the Rings was the first time where they were focusing on the creators. They showcase Weta workshops, here are these two guys that just sit here and make chainmail 80 hours a day. Over here, the people who make all the orc armor. And then but they talked about the care that they took in developing the world. It was just hours and hours and hours of that. It was it's I stumbled upon a treasure trove of information.
Well,
and
we just stumbled on a treasure, which is you being on this show.
God, you'll make me blush. Stop.
No, you're amazing. Would you like to come back another time?
Yes.
Oh wow, I didn't even pause. Okay.
We'll definitely get her to do another interview for Fanfare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna definitely see you that day. We're gonna do some live interviews on location, but we definitely would like you to be a part of this show again. You're awesome. Is there a website or somewhere people could follow you and stalk your work?
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to stalk all of the stuff that I do that isn't animation related, then you can follow me on my Instagram. It's Rachel Sculpts, all one word. So that's where you'll see my bread making, my blacksmithing, my sculpting, everything that's not animated. The animation stuff that I work on, the best way to find it is Netflix, really, because the kinds of projects that I work on, I can't talk about them for a year until after I finish working on them, and then until they're officially released.
That's so awesome. I can't wait till the day so someone says, "Where can I find your stuff?" Just watch television. And just go to the movies. I'm all there. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Yeah. No, of course.
You're awesome. Sensei Vegan, as always.
Always a pleasure. Rachel, thank you so much for stopping by.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I'm 7. You're watching Eclecticka. That's everything sci-fi, fantasy, geek media. You know it. You're watching Eclecticka. See you guys next time.